As of November 2016, only 11% of Americans say they approve of Congress, and this number has rarely risen above 20% since 2011. This dissatisfaction could be attributed to many things, such as obstructionism, partisanship, and unfulfilled campaign promises. While people may have differing opinions on why this approval rating is so low, many Americans are beginning to rally around a single solution for fixing the perceived problem of Congress: term limits. Currently, there are no restrictions on the amount of times congressmen and women can be reelected, which has led to a class of politicians who have made a career out of serving in government. Congress has 535 voting members, 100 in the Senate and 435 in the House of Representatives. Out of these 535 voters, 79 of them have held their position for more than 20 years, and 16 have held their position for more than 30. Naturally, these most experienced politicians are in the leadership positions in the House and Senate. Examples include Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who has served for 31 years, Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid, who has served for 29 years, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who has served for 27 years. With presidential term limits nearly universally accepted, it begs the question, why aren't Congress members held to the same standard? The Constitution didn't mention anything at all about term limits for the presidency or Congress. George Washington set the precedent of the president only serving for 2 terms. This precedent was followed by every succeeding president until FDR served a 3rd consecutive term. Following this, the 22nd Amendment was ratified in 1951, establishing a 2-term limit for the president. No such amendment for Congress has been ratified. The biggest issue with unlimited amount of terms is how it negatively affects how the congressmen legislate. Instead of focusing on passing important legislations to improve the lives of American people, they are focused on raising money for their re-election campaign. And with the cost of running a campaign continuing to increase, this is becoming more and more of a priority. Between 1986 and 2012, the cost of a Senate campaign increased 62%, while the cost of a House of Representative campaign increased 344%. House incumbents raise an average of $2,400 a day, while Senate incumbents raise an average of $4,700 a day, all while serving in office. When the system incentivizes re-election above all else, it shouldn't come as a shock when legislators are calculated when voting. Instead of voting in the best interests of the people, congressmen may be fearful of jeopardizing their re-election bid, either by voting against the popular opinion in their home state or by voting against lobbyists, weakening the relationship between them and their interest groups, which are a large source of contribution for their re-election campaign. Another unintended consequence of career politicians is a stagnation in terms of solutions. With politicians convinced they have all the answers and are facing no new opposition, they are able to continue to push the same policy prescription, even if they have no chance of being passed because they are too partisan. Opponents of a term limit amendment argue that term limits for congressmen would be detrimental or unnecessary. They feel that being experienced allows a congressman to become better at their job.
There has been some discussion about the limitation on terms. There are 2 schools of thought about that. One is that in most professions, the longer you're in, the more you know. And my experience in the Senate's been that you get better with experience, just like you do if you're making automobiles or selling insurance. So I'm not sure it makes much sense to throw out. They really become effective if you're necessarily going to get people better elected officials.
Opponents also argue that Congress have de facto term limits in the way of voting. They explain that if a senator or congressman's constituents don't approve of the job he is doing, they can simply vote him or her out of office. While in theory this is true, incumbents in Congress have a significantly higher chance of winning because of all the advantages they have. These include a higher name recognition, money from donors and interest groups, and experience in running a successful campaign. The statistics suggest this system simply isn't working. With Congress's 11% approval rating, you would think that there would be significant turnover in Congress. However, this is not the case. In the 2016 election, 90% of incumbents in the Senate won re-election, while 97% of incumbents in the House were able to retain their position. With 75% of Americans in support of legislation that would introduce term limits for Congress, it makes one wonder why very little progress has been made on the issue in the last 20 years. There are several answers to this question. The simplest is that it is not as simple as simply passing any other old bill. Just like with the presidential term limit, creating term limits for Congress would require a constitutional amendment to be passed.
That the Constitution has the qualifications for being a member of Congress. You have to be 25 years old for a House member, 30 years old to be a senator. You have to be a resident of the state that you're running from, and those are the only requirements, and that you cannot add to the requirements. The Supreme Court said you could not impose term limits on top of the existing requirements in the Constitution. The only way you could do it would be to amend the Constitution.
Passing a constitutional amendment requires 2/3 of the House and Senate to approve the proposed amendment. Then the amendment must be sent to the state legislators, where it must be approved by 3/4 of the states to be ratified. With many congressmen not willing to give up the opportunity to govern for multiple terms, the only chance an amendment has of passing is if 2/3 of state legislators call for a constitutional convention, where an amendment can be ratified if 3/4 of the states approve the amendment. However, this isn't likely, as an amendment has never been ratified in this fashion. A movement to pass term limits arose in the mid-90s, but despite bipartisan support and leadership from Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, the proposal couldn't get the required support to ratify an amendment. For nearly 20 years, the issue was ignored, but the recent dissatisfaction with Congress has led to a new wave of support for the amendment, both from citizens and legislators. 2016 presidential candidates Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, and Ted Cruz all voiced their support for the measure, as did President-elect Donald Trump.
If I'm elected president, I will push for a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on all members of Congress.
We hope that President-elect Donald Trump continues to reiterate to the American people the current problems that plague Congress and keeps the issue in mind of the American people.